I thought the wildflowers on my property were beautiful. To the HOA Karen, they were an eyesore. My land bordered a quiet residential neighborhood, but unlike the manicured lawns inside the development, my property was intentionally left natural. Every spring, thousands of wildflowers covered the field. Yellow blooms, purple flowers, tall native grasses moving in the wind. It wasn't messy. It was a natural habitat that had been there for years. Then one afternoon, I noticed something strange. Several sections of the wildflower field had turned brown. At first, I thought it was a drought. Then I saw the HOA president standing near the property line. She was looking toward the field with a smile. I walked over and asked what happened. She casually told me the vegetation had been treated because homeowners wanted a better view. I stared at her. "You treated my property?" She said the HOA had arranged for a landscaping crew to clean up the area. I told her she had no permission to enter my land. She shrugged. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Everyone will appreciate the improved view." I looked across the field. The wildflowers were dying, and the more I investigated, the stranger the situation became. The HOA had apparently decided that the natural vegetation made the neighborhood look less attractive. They wanted an open view toward the countryside. So instead of asking me, they took matters into their own hands. I immediately photographed the damaged area. I documented the dead plants. I marked where the treatment appeared to have occurred, and I started looking through my property records. That's when I found an old research file. It had been sitting in a county archive for years. The file contained environmental research conducted on the land. And according to the records, my wildflower field wasn't simply decorative vegetation. It was part of an important native habitat. The researchers had documented several native plant species and identified the field as an environmentally significant area. Suddenly, the HOA's little landscaping project didn't look so harmless. I contacted the appropriate local authorities and provided copies of the research. An environmental review followed. Inspectors came out. They examined the field. They collected information, and they reviewed how the vegetation had been removed. The HOA president insisted that the organization had only wanted to improve the neighborhood's appearance. But appearance wasn't the issue anymore. The question was whether the HOA had authorized work that damaged an environmentally significant habitat without proper approval. Then the inspectors discovered something else. The landscaping company had apparently been given instructions to clear the vegetation right up to the property boundary, and parts of the treatment had crossed onto my land. The HOA suddenly had a much bigger problem. Homeowners began asking questions. Why had the HOA approved the work? Who authorized it? Why had nobody checked the environmental records? And why had the HOA entered private property? The president tried to blame the landscaping contractor. The contractor blamed the instructions they had received. But the paperwork told a different story. The HOA's own records connected the project directly to the board. Then came the number nobody expected. The estimated environmental restoration and associated costs reached approximately $600,000. The HOA meeting that followed was chaos. Homeowners who had originally wanted a better view were now demanding answers. Some were furious. Others couldn't believe the board had taken such a massive risk over landscaping. The HOA president tried to defend the decision. She argued that nobody expected the project to become this serious. But that was exactly the problem. They hadn't checked, they hadn't researched, and they hadn't asked permission before touching someone else's property. Meanwhile, the restoration process began. Damaged areas were carefully assessed. Native vegetation had to be replanted. The affected habitat required monitoring. And the HOA was forced to deal with the consequences of a decision that had started with something as simple as wanting a better view. Eventually, the field began recovering. New wildflowers appeared. Small patches of green returned. And the natural landscape slowly started looking like itself again. One afternoon, I stood at the edge of the field and watched the wind move through the flowers. The HOA president drove past. She looked toward the field. This time, she didn't complain about the view. She didn't mention the weeds. She didn't talk about landscaping. She just kept driving, because the wildflowers had taught the neighborhood an expensive lesson. Sometimes what looks like an overgrown field is actually an ecosystem. Sometimes the quietest piece of land has years of research behind it. And sometimes one forgotten research file can change everything. The HOA wanted a better view. Instead, they got a $600,000 lesson. If you enjoyed this HOA story, make sure to subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.